You're listening to the NABS Now Podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Welcome to the NABS Now Podcast, and I'm your host, Nina, and we hope that all of you had a very successful semester and are now having a very relaxing and exciting summer break. So on that note, we wanted to do a June episode all about students and guide dogs, and we're going to hear from two students who have a lot of experience in this area, and then we're also going to hear from a field representative from Guiding Eyes for the Blind. A quick note, the NABS Now Podcast does not endorse any one guide dog school over the other. However, we just were unable to fit all schools into this episode. So we were getting some very general advice from a field representative from one of the schools. So happy listening, and I hope you guys enjoy this.
Hey listeners, it's Seyoon here. I'm one of the producers of the NABS Now Podcast on the back end, and well, today we're talking all about guide dogs. Just so as a background, I have just completed my sophomore year here at St. Louis University, entering into my junior year with a major in social work. Now, I had my guide dog for a little over a year now from Guide Dogs for the Blind, and I want to walk you through a little bit of my journey of getting a guide dog, how it has been, and really just the truth of whether this is a decision that is appropriate for you and in your lifestyle as a college student. So let's get into it. So I feel like the biggest question someone should ask, or you should ask to yourself, is whether guide dog is intriguing. How did you learn about guide dogs? Do you think this is a right decision? And how will this benefit you? And for me, that was also some of the questions, not all, that I've asked myself before I applied for my own guide dog. And for me, I think the biggest driving factor, and something that I recommend everybody do if you have an opportunity to do so, is just be around other guide dog handlers. Ask lots and lots of questions, because trust me, something you hear online and research will not equate to someone with a guide dog that could tell you all the ins and outs, all the pros and cons about having one. Really, my first big exposure to guide dog was when I attended Leader Dogs for the Blind Summer Experience Camp back in 2016, I believe. I spent a week doing normal camping activities, but the biggest emphasis of this program was exposure to guide dog and guide dog education. And I don't mean Juno walks and even a wheeler, which is just fake fluffy dog on wheels with harness attached, a real guide dog. So I was exposed to this male golden retriever who I have worked with for a day and got to learn about my love for dogs. I always enjoyed being around dogs, and frankly, if you want one, you gotta love being around dogs, because you'll be with them 24/7. Upon completion of that summer experience program, I thought about obtaining my own dog. Given my progressively degenerative vision, I thought it was a great idea, but I've considered heavily. This was years and years of me contemplating before I submitted my very first application in the summer of 2018. Now, I applied to Guide Dogs for the Blind, which is based in Summerville, California, in Boring, Oregon, but I've also considered many other schools. And I feel like as future guide dog handlers, or successor guide dog handlers, I feel like it's always important to revisit this question. What school is right for you? Each school uses different training methods, breeding, alumni support, financial assistance for medical and vet expenses, and more that should be considered before choosing a particular school. Think of it like a college application. You could apply to multiple schools and withdraw as needed. It was my senior year in high school when I submitted my first application. It was then I realized that my priority has to be straightened out. At the time, I was completing my college applications and wasn't quite sure where my future would land and where. So for me, continuing my guide dog application didn't seem very logical, which is why I reached out to the admissions counselor at GTB to put my application on hold. When my college of choice was fully decided, I decided to resume my application in the February of 2019 and proceeded to a home interview in April. It was that end of July where I traveled to Boring, Oregon to get a guide dog that I have now. Since then, we've been through a number of major changes, the latest being that I have acquired my very first off-campus apartment. We've also lived in 2 on-campus housing, 1 dorm room, one apartment, as well as we traveled to various other places, such as the NFB's 2020 Washington Seminar in Washington, D.C., an Amtrak travel trip to Springfield, Illinois, and small road trips with my family here and there. Now, through various changes in my life to where I am currently, my dog's been through and through and have stuck with me by my side. To have a travel companion that could guide you safely and does the job really well, and to know that this is your companion and your plus one that will always be by your side in classrooms, libraries, staying up late night, studying for finals, or no matter where your destination takes you. Guide dogs offer a huge benefit, in my opinion, in my everyday life, as I use mass transportation services and walking around complex stores and malls, airports, and hotels. My dog thrives with traveling, but it is also important to understand the responsibilities. My consistent schedule is based on my dog. Wake up at 8 in the morning, feed, water, relieve, making sure he goes to the bathroom once again before I go to bed. And throughout the day, make sure he gets food at approximately 5 p.m. if I need to take him to the vet. And making judgments, counting where your destination takes you if the place doesn't seem unfit for a dog. Advocating for you to have reasonable access in rideshare services, which has been controversial lately, for denying passengers and riders with a legitimate guide dogs. Even at restaurants where we see denials from entry, there's this analogy that is often used. Your cane serves as an object locator and your dog as an object avoider. And I think that's true. Your dog has a pair of eyes that could see and could take you around obstacles. But in order for that to happen, you as a handler needs to be aware of where you are, orientation, and know where you're going. You're in control of this journey. You're in control of this team. Giving directions to your dog, making corrections as necessary because dogs are not perfect, and knowing when to safely cross streets. Now, I'm not saying this because guide dogs are extremely difficult to care and maintain. It is because it is the truth of owning a guide dog. While they provide benefits that outweigh the downsides and your responsibilities, it is important to consider the larger picture of having a guide dog. I hope you enjoyed this little segment. Enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Lisa Derleth. I'm a regional guide dog mobility instructor, also known as a field rep. And I am from Rochester, New York. I work for Guiding Eyes for the Blind. And I have a territory that covers several states in the Northeast and also some in the South. And I also cover Ontario, Canada.
I actually did not know that you guys cover part of the South. That is very interesting.
Sure, we cover the whole United States.
I didn't know, like, from up here you cover so much.
Yeah. Well, some of that territory is new for me.
I was going to say, they must have expanded, but thank you so much for being here. I think what I first want to start off by asking you is, what do you think people should be considering before they get a dog?
Okay, well, there's several things that you really need to consider. This is a way of getting around with a guide dog that is a creature. It's a live creature. So you have to be aware of their needs 24/7. You have to financially be able to help take care of the dog, although there's guide dog organizations that can help with some of the funds. It's still a good idea to keep in mind that it costs minimum of $80 a month to keep that dog on a good food and towards veterinary costs too. So that's a very minimum amount. You also have to consider, are you going to be able to use this dog? Are you going to be able to get it out on routes almost every day that, and really it's for them to help you with the routes that you already have. So you very much need to have those routes in place and have good orientation mobility skills with a cane before you can consider a guide dog. But the main thing is are you going to be able to give this dog love and attention on a daily basis for the rest of the working life, which could be up to when they're 10 years old or even maybe a little bit more.
I like that. That's really good advice. And I know for me, like, when I was considering that I had enough roots, it's also knowing that, like, okay, because I know we're in COVID-19 right now.
Yeah.
If I don't have a working route every day, like, how am I going to get my dog exercise? You know what I mean? And, like, making sure that there's supplemental exercise for them to be a dog, too. And I think that's a really good, I know when I talk to students, they don't think about that. They're like, oh, well, like, if we're not working, then they just sleep. And I'm like, no, they get pretty hyper.
Yes.
They're like little kids.
Yes. And it depends on the dog, but in general, yes, they need an outlet, whether that's going to be a route in your daily activities, or if you have downtime at home, like you said, Nina, during COVID, then you do have to have somewhere where they can get their energy out. And, it's not always just a romp in the backyard. That certainly does help if they have a place where they can exercise as well.
My next question is, do you think, and this is sort of a matter of opinion, but are there any special considerations students need to make, especially if students are going to be living on campus?
So, because you're going to be in a group, congregate group setting, you probably heard that word a lot with COVID, but because you're going to be in a group setting with lots of other people, whether it's in your dorm area or in a dining hall or your classes, you really have to consider, how can I get this dog out easily if they need to go, which they're going to have to go, 5+ times a day to relieve. So I would say, make sure that you can get in an area where it's pretty close to a door. Of course, not for your classes, but in the dorm setting. You also have to be concerned, because there's so many people that you'll be encountering. The dog is going to be a distraction to some point. And whether you're on campus or living or working in a busy area, they're going to draw attention. And sometimes that can be annoying. You're just trying to get from one place to another. And people are like, oh, what a sweet dog. I have a Labrador. Would your dog like a treat? Everything that guide dog users hear will happen on campus. And it's a matter of educating people on a regular basis without getting heated. And because you want to present yourself as someone who is giving information instead of someone that's getting annoyed. So you have to be on alert a lot, as far as with so many people around you all the time on campus. And you have to give directions and, even give out a flyer or something explaining to people, what your dog does and what you do as a team and how they can respect you when you're traveling somewhere, or if you're even just hanging out with your dog. So they know not to touch the dog. They know not to feed the dog. They know not to make eye contact with the dog. So, people may decide that they're going to have downtime when people can say hello to them, and that's a personal decision. Like anywhere where you're going to be in touch with people, like if you're at a work environment or whatnot, you want to give people that information ahead of time. So hopefully you get through to some of those people in advance before they're interfering with you and the work with you and your guide.
Yeah, my school's biggest major is vet techs. So
yeah.
we like license vet techs and stuff. And so we actually raise dogs as a school. And so everyone's used to being able to pet all the dogs. And everyone was super receptive to Vigo, like not petting him because I think they have a little bit more knowledge about service dogs than the basic population. But it was still an adjustment for a lot of people, because usually it's like, oh, like we're trying to socialize these dogs. And I'm like, no, my dog doesn't like really need to socialize.
Right.
I'm like, he went through that. But I think something to note for some students who might be listening, we talk a lot about like the ADA and your educational rights and stuff like that. You, depending on the school, like you do have a right to an accommodation for a single room. So I know for me, because I do have a guide dog who is 75 pounds and takes up a room. But beyond that, I was a little bit nervous about having a roommate, only because of the fact that people leave things out or on the floor or in easy reach. And that's a conversation to have, but it's also sometimes something you can't 100% control another person. And so in a school, like you can talk to your disability service coordinators about housing accommodations and having a single room because of a service dog. I think that's something important to note for students. It saved me a lot of stress.
It's great information, Nina.
Yeah, so that they're not eating someone's things that they're not supposed to be eating. I think my last question, you've been like super helpful so far, is if someone is on the fence about whether a guide dog would be right for them, they like the idea, but they're not sure if it would fit them or their lifestyle. Do you have any advice for how to go about making an informed decision? Because obviously it's a
Sure.
big one.
So most of schools have websites that give a lot of information, but I think you're going to get the most information from talking with other guide dog users and talk to several, because everybody's going to have a different opinion. And I just think that's super important, because the reality, the dream of having a guide dog and the reality can be two very different things. I've seen
A little bit,
yeah, I've seen people who are very qualified to have a guide dog, but it doesn't fit their lifestyle. And there is going to be a time when you first get the dog, and it could be several months up to a year, where there's going to be an adjustment period. And are you ready for that adjustment period? You have to really ask yourself if you can afford to have a guide dog, and if you are ready to have this extra being with you all the time. You know, there may be times when there is a little downtime where they're staying with somebody because may not be a good idea to bring the dog with you for whatever reason. But for the most part, you're going to be in charge of that dog, much like parents are in charge of children.
I always joke that they're a toddler, but they don't get better about eating or like putting things in their mouth they're not supposed to, because it's the same idea.
Yeah, exactly. And you just have to be prepared to, have control over your dog at all times and follow the rules of what the school has given you that you've obtained the guide dog from. And a lot of people, they may slack at first when they do get a new guide dog, but the dividends will be great if you are a rule follower with that dog, but yet understand that it's a creature. So you have to give a lot of love to it too, and affection. Honestly, I'd say if someone's really on the fence and they just can't decide, maybe you have to wait a little longer, until you really make that decision the best you can and understand what it all involves. And I know some people, especially students, they may be going from high school to college. And I usually tell people, if you're considering it, it's almost better to get your dog, if you qualify, in your junior year of high school.
I did that, yeah.
Yes, or to wait after your freshman year. And I say that because there's so much transition that goes on between you and your guide dog, that you want to give that dog to settle into a certain kind of lifestyle before you rapidly move on. So in other words, if you got a dog in your summer between high school and college, that could be a lot on you and the dog, because the dog just got used to an environment, or is just getting used to an environment at home. And then they're going off to college, and the student really has a lot to adjust to just with college. Anybody does. So sometimes it's easier to get to know the environment yourself better at college, with the help of orientation mobility, before you get that guide dog. So ideally, it'd be maybe between your freshman and sophomore year at college, if not your junior year of high school.
I know I've heard a lot, especially when I was in class, that it takes like a year to have a fully formed team most of the time. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when you're getting a dog, and even when you're in class, you're like, okay, you kind of believe it, but you kind of don't. And then you go home and you're like, oh my God. And everyone's experience is different, but I know for my team, it really did take a good 6 months for us to get into like that better place, and then a good year for us to fully form it. And then, and we were pretty strict on a lot of things, and then like I found that after the year I could adjust a little bit and like still be consistent but figure out what works for us. But that first year I like had to stick to like everything that was given in class, like to a T, and it really did. But like now I have one of the most flexible dogs I've ever seen, so the payoff is really high. Like now he can go anywhere, you know what I mean, because we're consistent. And so it really is worth checking out. And I know all of us on the podcast today, all the students, would be more than happy to talk to anyone who has any other follow-up questions or wants more information about having a guide dog as a student. So our contact information is in the description. and we would be more than happy to talk with you. So you can reach out to me via email and we can make those connections. But Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. I know we all appreciate it so much to get some expertise.
No
Someone who works with these little pups all the time.
Hi, my name is Alycia, and I have a 3-year-old black lab named Daphne from the Seeing Eye. We became a team just about 2 years ago.
So we're going to start off with something kind of basic. How did you first decide to get a guide dog? What was that process like for you?
So for me, I first kind of started thinking about getting a guide dog after I finished my training. It was about a year after I finished training that I was really just interested in learning more in terms of travel
training?
And learning how. Oh, yeah, blindness. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Sorry.
I was just wanted to clarify. So you went to blindness skills training, then about a year later you wanted to get a guide dog?
Yes, so I went to blindness skills training, and about a year later, I started getting interested in the process of getting a guide dog. I had a lot of friends who at the time were also kind of in the same boat of either just getting a guide dog or looking to get a guide dog, and I started to really just get interested in what a guide dog could provide for me as an independent traveler. So I started doing the research and decided that a guide dog for my lifestyle and for the way that I travel was a good fit for me.
If you feel like your experience as a student has been enriched by a guide dog, can you kind of explain how that occurs and what benefits a guide dog has provided you as a student?
Yeah. So as a student, I feel like a guide dog has actually helped a lot with building a good schedule and a good routine, a good daily routine to go off of. For me, I find myself kind of being unmotivated when I don't have anything to like actually motivate me to get up and do stuff. So a guide dog for me, she makes me get up out of bed in the morning. She makes me make sure that I'm keeping track of my time. She ensures in her own little way that I am staying focused on what I need to do, because I know that I also have to meet her needs as a handler. And so as a student, I feel like she actually helps me to focus on what I need to do, because I'm always keeping track of my time, how much time I have to study, or how much time I have before, a class, how much do I have in order to get things done before I have to go take care of her. So it really helps with productivity, actually.
Are there any important considerations you think students should know about before they decide if a guide dog would be right for them?
For me, I think a very important consideration, the first one that comes to mind, is make sure that your lifestyle is appropriate for you to have a dog. It's one thing to be able to take care of the dog, but it's another thing to make sure that that dog has enough work. As a guide, obviously they love to work, right? They have been trained for this their whole lives, and this is what they live for. And so being able to provide that work while also being able to keep up with your studies, being able to make sure that you provide them as well as yourself a good routine is, in my opinion, very, very important for both you and the dog. And another thing that comes to mind too is make sure that you have the financial means to take care of a dog. I know that as college students, obviously it's kind of hard sometimes to budget out for ourselves, let alone a dog. And yourself. So make sure that you, before you choose to go into that process of getting a dog, are ready financially and are prepared for anything that may come up throughout the working life of your dog as a student.
Very good points, because being a broke college student is real.
Oh, yeah.
How have people on campus responded to your dog?
Right. So I was in school before the pandemic, so I did have some experience on campus, which was actually a very nice thing, in my opinion. And from my personal experience, people actually have responded very well to my dog on campus. I was not the only one with a service dog, so people kind of did have some exposure to others, but it was great to kind of be able to educate those who maybe hadn't had so much experience with service dogs, while also just making sure that people who maybe did see us on a regular basis knew as well that, like, It was just a college student and her dog, and she's been very well received on campus. And everyone loves her, working or not. They are respectful, and it's been a great sort of public relations experience, in a sense, to be able to have her with me and educate those who we encounter on an everyday basis.
I love that. I found that to be the case as well. And our last question is kind of just a general question, so take it whatever way you please. But do you have any overarching advice for any students who are not 100% sure if a guide dog would be right for them or not?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that comes to mind is do your research. Ask if you have friends who are handlers, ask them questions about what it was like when they first started thinking about getting a dog.
We will tell you.
Yeah, we will tell you. We definitely will. We will be upfront with it, right? We're not going to sugarcoat anything, because I don't know about you, Nina, but for me, though I was interested in getting a dog, I was at first very nervous about the process, especially given the fact that I was still a student. Obviously a college student's life is not always that predictable. And so kind of being able to plan ahead as much as you can in terms of knowing what your day-to-day life is going to look like, and kind of, in a sense, visualizing, can a dog fit into the schedule that I have? Like I always say to students who ask me for advice, this is your life, right? And that dog has to fit into it. So if you're finding that you're not seeing a dog in the schedule that you currently have or that you will have as a student, maybe wait a little while before choosing to go and get a dog. But if you do find that a dog can easily fit into that schedule and you know that you can manage a dog on top of your studies, go for it.
I love that. I know it's a different journey for everyone, so the timeline doesn't always look the same. And I think that's an important point that you raised, that's okay, and it's a very individual process. Well, thank you so much for sharing about you and
You're
Daphne's
welcome.
story of dogs and handlers. Thank you so much to Seyoon, Alycia, and Lisa for all of your great advice. And I hope that for those of you interested in getting a guide dog, this episode was helpful and definitely gave you some things to think about on that amazing journey. So we'll see you next time on the NABS Now Podcast.